Misogyny could be considered its own form of extremism under new laws in the UK. It's all part of a review of the country's counter-extremism strategies, targeting hateful ideologies online and offline. So should New Zealand do the same? Ellen O'Dwyer reports.
University of Auckland senior lecturer Dr. Chris Wilson believes extreme misogynistic violence is increasing globally.
The abuse that you see online appears to be increasing. There have been a growing number of violent events that appear targeted at women.
He says the Bondi Junction mall attack, in which Joel Couchy killed 5 women and 1 man, injuring 9 women and 2 men, is an example. Here's New South Wales Police Commissioner Karen Webb speaking to the ABC in the aftermath of the attack.
It's obvious to me, it's obvious to detectives that seems to be an area of interest that the offender had focused on women and avoided the men. As you know, and has been reported, 5 of the deceased are women, and the majority of victims in hospital are also women.
Police in the UK have described the threat of influencer Andrew Tate to radicalise young boys as a national emergency. The UK government is now considering classifying extreme misogyny in its counter-extremism plans to target harmful ideologies. Chris Wilson says New Zealand should consider doing the same.
This is not about curtailing free speech or placing sanction on people for saying particular forms of speech. It's about being able to identify those individuals who appear to be on a path towards violence.
A New Zealand Security Intelligence Service spokesperson told RNZ the agency already considers violent misogyny under its existing framework. But Chris Wilson is...
I'm interested as well, Chewie. Right, we're talking about violent misogyny, which I guess what they're saying is it's an aspect of misogyny, not just all misogyny overall. And the example they gave about the killing and injuring of sounds like 90% female to male victims. Is it the killing and the action of harm that is the extremism, or is it the misogyny that's behind it? And how do you legislate on that? So it's really interesting conversation, because if it wasn't misogyny, if it was a woman who had done that to the other woman, then it would be the action of the death that would be considered the extremism. So is it the action of the deaths, or is it the ideology behind those actions that gets labelled the extremism? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see people in the chat really chewing this over at the moment as well. Like, I think how to form my thoughts. I think they're right in identifying a potential threat.
Yep.
And that the way that, like, people often, there's a couple of people in the chat mentioning Andrew Tate and people of his ilk.
Yeah.
This really toxic form of masculinity, and I guess what we've seen overseas with incels and that sort of thing, that seem to think that the world owes them female companionship, and the only reason that these people haven't been issued a woman is because the unfairness of it all. And overseas, they've had people drive cars into crowds, go on stabbing rampages. There's been attacks on universities and that sort of thing from that ideology. So there is a threat there. There is a risk of that. So speech often leads to action.
Yeah.
And this is why we have conversations about hate speech. I think misogyny, or this extreme misogyny, comes under that umbrella of hate speech quite handily. And I think it's the discussion of including it in that, I think, is very worthy. And just because something like that hasn't really happened here doesn't mean that we don't get to talk about it before it happens.
No, but I think you've identified the concept, right? Speech leads to actions. So do you criminalize the speech, or do you criminalize the actions? Because if people have the speech that doesn't lead to violent actions, so that's where in that continuum do you draw it? I mean, they always talk about hate speech, and they always talk about, but it's credible threats are a crime. You know, so this is I mean, and you know, with me, there's no such thing as a free speech purist. Don't believe anyone who tries to tell you that. Right? Everyone has lines somewhere, and my line would always lean towards more speech than less. But there are definitely lines, and this is one of those conversations: is where does society draw that line? Because there's got to be lines somewhere.
Because I mean, look, I haven't spent a lot of time listening to Andrew Tate. I'm certainly aware of him and some of the things that he's spoken about. And I think he is a misogynist, rapist, sex trafficker, just a grab bag of horrible, horrible traits. But I don't know if he has gone to the point of, say, making an active threat or a call to action for people that follow his ideology to do these things.
Yeah.
And I think that's the line that is it's the fuzzy gray line where we go, okay, well, no one has specifically given a call to action or an instruction to people, so then they should be able to say what they like. But we get to that point where people going, you know, I'm not telling people to do this, but certainly wish someone would. The people that know that they can get away with that. And I don't have an answer to that.
Something that intrigues me.
You go too far down that line.
You've brought up that the comedy show about the evangelical American thing. Mike says, would it affect misogyny in religion? That's a really interesting question. You know, because within some sects, cults, religions, whatever, the way that the man is seen as the absolute authority above all the women, that's a really, because, you know, I love a religion conversation. That to me is a really interesting conversation.